Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well today. I've got the Four of Coins as the obstacle and the Six of Cups. And just want to say before I start, I've started this job a little while ago, and sometimes I get like a couple 12-hour shifts day after day after day, and I haven't been able to roll out the new feature. I'm very, the new layout that I'm really excited to do. But tomorrow's my last day of the crazy shift, so I should have some more time afterwards. Anyway, jumping into it. With the Four of Coins, the thing that came to my mind, the interpretation I thought of today was it's much more influenced by the Marseille and some of its neighboring cards, which I unfortunately don't have set up here. But I was thinking about, it made me think about um, like just the gestation period before birth, and then the period afterwards when this new being, this new life is maturing, you know, being being taught, being socialized. I kind of thought it was interesting that there's this weird juxtaposition of often trying to apply all of these agreed upon standards of how you should raise your kid, um, in order to bring about an individual that has the the most amount of freedom, the most amount of autonomy, but also in that sense is the least predictable. And so I'm speaking of like an ideal here. I know a lot of I know a lot of parents and communities, they want to see children be raised into productive, dependable members of the community. That you can count on. They show up, they do their work, they stand up for the values of the community, that kind of stuff. But I think that if you were to ask, expecting parents, I imagine anyways that they would say that they want that they would like their child to be able to like achieve anything, to be a genius, to be an inventor that creates new things. Why not a great leader or a revolutionary or someone who makes a real impact, right? And there's really no recipe for making individuals that are revolutionary and forward, move forward the whole human race. It's there's just, or at least as far as I'm aware, I don't know. Maybe let me know if you've heard of something, but um, nonetheless, that I feel like that would be, I would imagine that would be the ideal hope, and yet the way the way that often is the way that we raise our kids as a species, like human beings, almost everywhere around the world, very have a very orderly approach to raising their kids, and they have a very, I think, consensus driven approach. It's, or certainly, I don't know, maybe just like first world countries, that kind of thing. Like, I don't know, I don't know anyone. I haven't heard of anyone that's just like, I'm gonna raise my kids my way. I'm not gonna consult any doctors. I'm not gonna consult any experts in how to create a curriculum of education and teach my, people who are just like, just raising my kid the way I feel like as an individual. So I feel like there's this interesting contrast between that kind of conformity that then ideally is supposed to give, paradoxically give rise to this individuality out of it. Um, and I, it's just it's a really tough call when to sort of scale back the demand for conformity from the individual. And I think that as far as using that child raising thing as an analogy to personal works of creative activity. I don't know, you're building something, you're working on something. There's I think that there are a lot of projects that can truly become great. And I think in the past, I'm sure there must have been plenty of projects that became great because at a certain point, the person who gave birth to that product just kind of let that thing go in its own direction. There's a lot of inventions. I'm thinking of bubblegum for some reason. I'm sure there's plenty of other ones that made a more significant impact on the world. But people are trying to invent one thing, and it's an absolute failure, and then they go, "Oh, this is kind of a pleasant sensation when I chew on this," and then, boom, chewing gum. And and I think the obstacle here might be kind of just keeping, and again, paradoxically, it's like if you have creative forces within you, if you have that energy, if you're inspired to create things, it's kind of, I think it could really interfere with the potential of the thing you create to then box it up as soon as it starts taking shape and approach it with a lot of orderliness and as opposed to letting it kind of grow organically. And another example I guess I could think of is like in the programming community. Often someone will come up with a pretty good idea, but then they'll put the code out there and they'll just make it open source and they'll open it up to a community and they'll pretty much say, "Hey, whoever wants to modify it, start your own essentially start your own fork in the road and start developing in your direction, and then I got the ball rolling, and then whoever wants to continue with it." A lot of amazing pieces of software have been created that way. But yeah, it just kind of made me think about the interesting and kind of ironic. I think that would live up to the definition of irony. Is like you're you're aiming for individuality by means of conformity. Is that irony? I think that is. I'm not sure. Anyways, now we've got the Six of Cups, and this one, um, this one made me think about how there is made me think about dreams, nightmares, irrational the the irrational subconscious things. And this on one hand, thinking about those kinds of weird ideas, fantasy, strange dreams, things that sort of bubble up from our deeper, more suppressed animal parts. And then on the other side, a potentially as confusing, if not more confusing, behavior of people in our lives. Sometimes, sometimes I think people describe a social situation as, it was a total nightmare. And an element of nightmares, I think, often is the confusing, unpredictable nature of them. It's not just that scary things are happening, but we often deal with scary situations just fine when we're awake because we can remind ourselves that we have some things that we could grab onto for stability, whether we're talking literally or metaphorically. But often in dreams that get nasty, there's nothing to grab onto. Nothing is consistent. Things keep moving in this weird kind of fluid, elusive way, right? And I find that there's often analogies in the real world, in our waking lives, often when dealing with people who maybe it could seem like out of nowhere start behaving really chaotically and unpredictably. They're quote unquote out of character, but it just means, I mean, they're still probably perfectly within their character. It's just the way we've known them so far doesn't it's not syncing up with the way they're acting right now. And thinking about those two experiences of that kind of strange, unclear, confusing, agitated, anxiety inducing unknown kind of made me think about how one of the things that I think we all have in common is that, and I might get my biology wrong here, but like we all have that brainstem, we all have that amygdala, we all have those parts that are really primitive in terms of what they're worried about. You know, we have these deep old parts of our brain that I think create a lot of consensus of experience among us. You know, I think it's one of those things that we have in common is a pretty good chance of dealing with our own kind of difficult to understand subconscious, like weird irrational fears, weird irrational desires, things that bubble up from our subconscious. um, and it kind of it made me remember a couple of times in my life when I was facing these kinds of situations, particularly in I don't know, more serious situations, relationships wise, like maybe someone that's really important to you in your life does something really out of character. It's not just like some nobody that does something out of character and you're like, oh, so and so was being so weird today. It's like this is someone that maybe you've built a life with. Maybe this is like a family member. Maybe it's someone you really depend on. Could be, I don't know, like the employee that you need your company to run, or it could be your employer that employs you. And but but yeah, when it's in those situations where it's like, what the hell is happening? I'd have no idea why this person is acting this way. I think at times like that, it's been really helpful and kind of funny in a way to remind myself that for the most part, I also don't understand where any of my weird, subconsciously sort of influenced desires and thoughts come from. And like, I still have weird dreams and I have no idea where those ideas come from. Like, there's recognizing that there's that part inside me that I can't even really understand, I think kind of makes it easier to acknowledge that maybe there's a good chance that when that other person seems to be you know being really irrational or whatever, it's like, well, they could also just be having one of these moments where this irrational subconscious aspect of us that we both share just maybe happens to be manifesting itself. um, yeah, I mean, certainly not recommending going through life presuming that everyone we interact with is always just having some sort of subconsciously motivated and overpowering experience of irrational behavior. But just as a reminder, like I like reminders in general that you know help me shift my perspective to something a little bit more optimistic. Another one unrelated to this is like, I like to remind myself that I think people only really do the best that they can. Some people have, some people have two choices to pick from in critical situations. Some people have 10 choices to pick from in a similar critical situation. Sometimes that person, even with just the two choices, is picking between two really, you know, benevolent, great, wise choices. And it almost doesn't even matter which he picks. He'll still pick the best one, but they're both great. Sometimes that person with 10 choices, they got more options, but their best choice is still something just terrible. It's like they might they might still pick the best thing they see as an option for themselves. That doesn't mean it's going to go over well, but certainly when people do mean things to me, I often like to remind myself that, like, that's most likely the best thing that person could have imagined happening at that point in time. I mean, generally, I just like to imagine that people always always go with what they think is the smartest choice. You know, I don't imagine people being like, oh yeah, I have these three options. I'm gonna pick the stupidest one. You know. Now, obviously, people's standards for what is good and bad are different. But yeah, even if someone does something that ultimately hurts me, I still imagine that they made the best choice they could. So little things like that. So this one is the, you know, unity, unity through our shared irrational, subconsciously influenced moments of unpredictable behavior and lack of clarity. Yeah, hope that could come in handy sometimes. I'm gonna wrap things up. Thank you very much for watching. Drop me a like if you enjoyed the video. Also, feel free to comment. Free reading to be entered into a draw for a free one-on-one reading. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll talk to you then. Take care.